Good morning, everyone. Let's get this show on the road. We have another great artist today, one of my favorites, by the way. But first, before I forget, don't forget to turn your phones off, please. No Amber Alerts today. But welcome again for another great day. This morning, we're going to start off with Iain Stewart. According to his website or the internet, he was born in Scotland, but lived in the United States, mostly in Alabama now. Is that right?
Yes.
Has a background in architecture and photography and wonderful watercolor painting. So all the other credentials and shows, look it up online. He's great. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. How are my levels? Can everyone hear me? I love it. Louder? Louder? I don't have any control over that, so that's why I'm asking. Thanks so much for the introduction. And special thanks to Lauren and Eric and the panel. I thought that was extremely informative. And it's been a great event, so let's hope we continue along those lines. I do come from an architectural background, so I spent, excuse me, well, we need, tell them that. Hello? That's what now we're good? Okay. I have a background in architecture, and I have been an architectural illustrator for the last 30 years, something like that. So making the jump, and that was in watercolor, so making the jump from that to much more loose and free painting has been one of the true pleasures of my life. I don't know if you've seen the little video of when they let the cows out in the spring. In Europe, you know, they've been inside the barn and they sort of gamble around the field. That's what I feel like when I don't have any rules on my paintings. What I did, and when I first started, it was much more in that strict architectural style. So I was really kind of doing glorified renderings, very tight about buildings. And slowly my interest started to shift to, okay, if the city's, you know, what activates a city? And it's all at ground level. So then thinking, okay, city's now my backdrop and the action is what really makes it alive. But I had to relearn how to be loose. And so a lot of my workshops, I have architects coming and sort of saying, teach me how to be loose. And I try. A couple of ideas, by the way. Do time drawings. Work in your sketchbook. This is the place that you learn. Draw from life, as they said. But this is your safe place. If you don't want someone to see it, you know, and if somebody just walks up and opens your sketchbook, give them a hard stare. And then if you need to, you know, I'll let you escalate at your discretion. So these are all on site for the most part, I think. And sometimes you just have a moment to grab something, you know, just a quick sketch. This is, don't worry about that, but this kind of stuff's me really beginning to explore how to create a painting.
Could you lift your sketch up a little bit to the camera?
How's that? I can paint like this. Upside down? No. Why? Okay. So, here's a little idea of the process. Yeah, I do a couple of thumbnails, then I start to work on what I'm going to do detail-wise, and then immediately, whack. In the sketchbook, I don't feel the need to do a lot of preparatory work. And so the results vary, but there's always a bit of spontaneity involved. These are actually done at pace this year, and I really hope these places are still there because they're all in those mountain areas. You get the idea. Here's one I was teaching with an organization in Santa Fe. So this is the oldest building in the United States, continuously inhabited, I think. And this is the oldest church. And this is the Santa Fe Trail that runs from, Denver to Mexico City or something like that. I should have it written down, but I don't. But again, so if you want to better your work, the idea that you start a painting and at the end of it, you've got to have something that you can sign. No. Play. Experiment in ways that don't cost you, in ways that you won't ruin a painting. For some reason, if you have, can you see this? Because I can't see, I don't have eyes in the back of my head. So, once you've got a drawing on this paper, for some reason, and I know why, everybody begins to tighten up. You don't want to ruin that effort. So that's why I'm saying if there's any sort of technique stuff that you want to work it out on blank paper first. And then I'll do a really quick shot of, here's a little layout for this where I'm beginning to change and move shape around. I rarely let a photograph tell me exactly what to do. And I will move buildings around. I'll steal bits from other buildings, change the time of day, what have you. And I think that comes from that architectural background in illustration is you always get this really crappy shot of the site. It looks like the architect drove by at some speed and took a couple of shots, and then you've got a model to work from. So we're used to some guy saying, okay, make this a sunny day. Let's have kids playing with some balloons and da-da-da-da-da. So there's all these lists of things. So that takes a lot of the creativity out. And so when I get to this, I really enjoy it. Just play. No. I mean, what I do is before I do any work outside, I take a photograph. So I have whatever it is that stopped me, I have a record of that. And then if I'm sitting or standing, I'll take another reference photo from my exact vantage point. Otherwise you tend to, if you're outside, you tend to chase shadows and things like that. So there's a good, if the sun's good at a moment, grab it. If you start and it's gray and the sun comes out and you get good shadows, just take another picture. But maybe don't try to put them in the one you're working on because you've got a different vision, and if you switch that halfway through, it'll show. So, pencil. This is all pencil, and I do a layout with an F lead, and then I do it's me, yes. And then I come back with something like an HB or something like that. If you want to, hold on, I'm going to show you something. I forget What was I in the middle of saying? I've got like 9 things going on in my head. Oh yeah, okay, so the layout. So yeah, before I do that, and then, can you see this? Okay, so I stayed up and did some homework. So the first thing I do when I'm on site is I look for all the major action lines, which are basically, if we zoom in on that, the first one is going to be, the sky versus whatever's on the land. And I'll get rid of that. So here we have a wet day in Queensferry, Scotland. So then I will overlay very simple geometry on that. And that allows me then to begin to organize and see shape on a different level. So if I remove the reference photo, that's what I'm trying to see before I start drawing.
What program are you using?
This is called Procreate. It will set you back the princely sum of $10. So then here is sort of a more, and this is what I call the keyhole, which is just the negative shape and then looking at silhouette. And for me, that really unlocks the scene. So even if you've got perspective, you can kind of, if you get that right, you can work from there and things may go your way.
So if you're painting on a rainy day,
Yeah.
change the time of day or the sun coming out, how do you figure that out? That part's
Well, first off, you have to get somewhere inside or sheltered. On rainy days like that, then usually a lot of people are trying to occupy the same shelter, or sheep, or whatever it is, because you're not the only one with the idea about getting out of the rain. I think the trick there is to anticipate it coming and prep, and then get to a good spot, and just come back. I always say anything in my book or my sketchbook, I can leave it at any moment, just close it up. As long as I've got the reference photo, I can finish that later. So I'm not big into like sitting out in the elements and braving those while, doing that. I have painted with an umbrella to stay out of the rain, but it's not very practical. Things don't dry well, Although, before these Dyson the hand dryers at the Dysons, it's heavy air. The old-fashioned push hand dryers, they work great. You just go, if you buy a pint in a pub and you sit outside, you're allowed to go to the bathroom in there, and you just keep going back and drying your work and then coming back out. You'll freak the bartender out a bit, but And then lastly is the big plan. So I'd like to have some light here. I'm going to really simplify things. I'm going to move that figure to be a little more incorporated, and then just try and play everything down, go for the big stuff. If you want an exciting and challenging career, I highly suggest demoing. If you haven't tried it, I try to explain it to my friends, and they still don't really understand what I do, So occasionally somebody from, someone I grew up with, they could understand illustration, but now they're like, so you travel around and you paint for people and you teach? You got it. And you make money doing this? Sometimes. It's my son, whom I love very, very much. I was doing something maybe in Salt Lake, I can't remember, but he was 15 or 16. And I took a picture of the crowd. You notice I just took a picture of you guys before we started, because you could take pictures of me, I'd take pictures of you. So I posted that, and my kid goes, "That many people come out to see you paint?" Yes, that's crazy. And, you know, I have a very Scottish sense of humor that comes out of a very American sounding head. And so I tend to reply with a little bit of spin on things. So I looked at, I talked to the boy and said, "Do you enjoy having new jeans and shoes?" "I do, Dad." "Then shut up about the demoing. Or you try it." Okay. I'm just cleaning things here. This should be short and painless. So, demos versus workshops. This is more of a performance. I'm trying to keep you guys awake. I'll talk about the process while I do it, but then I'll also, in my mind, I'll have to kind of travel away to concentrate on this. So you're more than welcome to ask questions, but if I don't immediately reply, that means I'm trying to figure out something here that's freaking me out a little bit. If something does freak me out, you won't notice it most likely. And if you do notice it, then we got big problems. So this is just a little Naples Yellow and Jean Brilliant. The more you know before you paint, before you take this and put it anywhere, the more you can work out what these moves are, the higher your chance of success. So the grunt work of maybe drawing it 2 or 3 times, reorganizing, taking a break, coming back to it, doing a color study, doing a value study, all of these things. Again, I save that for my workshop groups, but the better you get to know that, the more chance you have of being successful in creating your vision there. Because that's the beautiful thing, is we all have our own voice. And so we would all approach this in a different manner. And when I'm jurying, I mean, maybe one of the most important things is it's not technical excellence necessarily. I mean, that's sort of a given, but it's what is this piece saying to me? How does it speak? Is there a narrative? And it doesn't have to be, but one big clue for me is if the painting keeps kind of tickling me to go back and look at it and go back and look at it. That usually means there's something else there that I can continue to sort of go into the painting. All right, so we have that. Let's get a little bit of, this is lavender, and I'm hoping I got that green out of it last night. I did, good. And this palette is a Craig Young. And then I've got a little Holbein that I use on the side. I actually like mixing in these flat wells a little bit better. This is a tricky palette to use. It's great if you're just running 4 washes, but then I do a lot of mixing on the side. So, let's get that. So that's lavender. And a good friend of mine once said to me, "Do you notice your students not breathing while they work?" You mean dying? But no, and then I started thinking about it and listening. And you'll see quite often, or I'll hear quite often people make a move, and then I hear, and I realize they've held their breath for that move. And I'm like, that's not good for you. That's not a habit to embrace. So I always sort of say, in with the good air, out with the bad, and this sort of try and get into this meditative state before I try and do something, especially in front of people, which quite thankfully, it's dark, so I can't tell how many people are here. It's good. So I'm going to get a little bit of, that's French ultramarine. I'm going to add just a little bit of burnt sienna to that.
Is that lavender, is it a bit opaque?
It is, it's got a little white in it. All right. I always try to mix more color than I'm going to use. The goal being have leftovers that then I can remix so that there's some harmony in the colors. That may not be the case, but if you're doing a long wash, it's a pretty good idea not to run out of water around here, because then if you start trying to mix on the fly, everything's drying. So once you hit this, it's all active, and you're committed. And that's a little alizarin crimson on the side there. Then I think we're going to warm up the foreground with some burnt sienna. It is. I travel with quarter sheets, and I tend not to check my art supplies because I did have a lost bag issue, and if you lose everything you've been painting with on the road for 10 years, that'll make you think for a moment. All I wanted was a nice, easy flight home for the last workshop of the year. And, an hour later, I'm standing, at Lost Luggage in Atlanta, trying to figure out what was in there, and it just kept revealing itself in a very, very upsetting way. We won't talk about that. So, this should look, and then again, I can't tell. Yeah. Everything I'm painting through, the only thing I paint around. So as I bring this down, you see there's a bead, and that's just a way of controlling the water as it comes down in a wash. But if I know something is going to be darker, then I can paint right through it. And then I allow these transparent layers to mingle. Okay, now I'm going to move into I'm going to start adding some of that lavender. But I think I need some, there we go. By the way, if I'm doing a demo in public, don't stand there, and don't stand there, but really never stand there because I flick. And I have, you just got my dress dirty. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I was distracted. Just a note for myself. So before I make this transition from the blue into that the Naples mixture, I'm going to just come in with a little, that's that alizarin crimson, and it's going to help sort of stop the greening of this, which is not something I really want to have happen. All right. and then clear water. My brushes, this is a synthetic Escoda 14 Ultimo, and then I have a series of perlas there for detail work. This should play nice. We'll see. So I'm going to take, that's graying up a little bit. I'm just going to take some of that out. Take some of the bead of that off with a thirsty brush. There we go. Now I'm going to start using water. You're not saving any whites. It's one of those gloomy Scottish days. There's nothing, light's not really doing us any favors. All right. So I'm going to dirty that, or take some of the chroma out of this burnt sienna, and then I'm going to begin making in this flap a mixture of these two, and I'm going to begin to build up a graded wash. I will have moments where I have to dry. So sound booth people, when I'll say I'm going to dry, go ahead and mute me. So a confident brush stroke. There's very, very few things more effective. And that's the kind of thing. Say if you want this dry brush effect, don't try and get it on something that matters. That's where practice on plain paper comes in. The other thing, and I'll keep harping on it, is every time you sit down to paint does not mean that you have to come up with a finished painting. That's crazy. We all need to warm up to some degree. And this is something, again, in my workshops that I do. We warm up in the morning. Before a performance, oops, let me steal some of this. Before any performance you've ever seen, be it sports, music, theater, the athletes, musicians, and actors are all doing their warm-up. They're doing scales or stretching, whatever it is, or saying these tongue twisters backstage. My mom's an actress, and she used to make us try and say those things. Repeat after me. It's actually pretty tough. There we go. All right. The thing I love about watercolor is it's alive. It's still doing stuff. If I want to take this and let things run up, I can do that. If I wanted granulation, etc. But you've got to give it some time to set before I take a hairdryer to it. I think John was mentioning Joseph Zbukvich, saying that a hairdryer will kill your painting. Well, I am not patient enough as well, I think. Also, if I had you waiting on these to dry, we'd be here a little bit longer than I think you'd want to. So. I want to stand up and see what this looks like so I get a better idea of what you're seeing. So that's kind of light, right? Yeah, I will as soon as this water stops being water and starts to become more paint. Right? So it's got a little more punch than you see, but it's a subtle painting. That's why yesterday when I came in here, I was like, oops, maybe should have gone for something a little more high key, but we will do our best with what we have. So, sound people, if you want to mute, go for it. This will take about 30 seconds or something. Mute me. Hello? Or not. That was the longest 30 seconds of my life. I tend to lie quite a bit during demos, or exaggerate. Okay. The paper still got some wobble in it, but there we go. That's where we are now. Thing about my painting, and when I'm discussing this or demoing, I'm talking about the way I work. I'm not talking about the way anybody else does. So let me make that distinction. And the fact that it'd be such a boring place if we all painted the same way, wouldn't it? Yeah. So the whole idea is this wash sets the tone, sets the mood. Oh my gosh. And then I start to carve out the big shape. So every move after this gets smaller and smaller and smaller. If you remember dioramas from back in the day, if you're, I'll stop it right there. Anyway, is the idea of this background, and then you have these pieces that keep building, that give you that sense of depth. Same thing here. It's just something may look dark or not, depending on the situation, but understanding that if you go too dark in the first wash, that's going to push all of the subsequent washes darker than you originally wanted them to be, and you will approach losing your glow. And that's something, losing luminosity is something we really try to plan against. You want to have your paintings glow in the unique way that watercolor can. So again, I'm left with these. So I'm just going to make that French ultramarine mix again. I came from nothing yet, but I will. This is sort of my one of my favorite mixtures. French ultramarine, alizarin crimson, and then I'll just tone that down with a little bit of burnt sienna. We've got a lot of yellow, but we've got orange and stuff too. So, typically that mixture I would, depending on what the underpainting is, I would let that mixture lean more to the blue side or the violet, depending on what complements around. In this case, I have everything, so it's very good. I approve. I'm going to take the original raw burnt sienna and add a little raw to that. Bless you. And then I'm just going to have, I've got a sort of cool and warm side here going. I don't think I need this lavender again, so I'm going to get rid of it. I think the goal, I mean, when I come out of the studio, is to be as dirty as I can. And that idea, that just, what did you do today? I played. Huh? I practiced. Oh, okay. Well, that sounds professional. Play. Don't forget that. You know, that's the idea that you're doing this for this pure enjoyment of it. And the results follow. They don't matter as much as you think they do. Good paintings rarely teach. Bad paintings teach very well. And so the larger that stack of bad paintings are, the good paintings begin to catch up. And then that whole 10,000 hours thing. I haven't been keeping track, sadly. I don't know where I am on that particular time scale, but I do know this. You want to be doing 10,000 of the right hours, because I have seen a lot of people repeat the same mistake over and over and over again. So if there's one thing, and I'm going to paint and talk at the same time, is if you can avail yourself of someone that will give it to you straight, that will talk honestly to you, and give you a real crit. Now that's a rarity. We don't set out on crits to take somebody out at the knees. A crit should point out things that they may not see, but then in this same instance should be lifting up and pointing out good parts or the little successes. Because, and I know of which I speak here, we are terrible at noticing the good parts in our paintings, and we are really, really good at finding the bad. So sometimes another set of eyes is really a good idea. This is rough 140 pound. It's still me. Excuse me? Yes. I paint on many different surfaces, arches, Fabriano, Saunders, and then also my sketchbook, which is a Stillman and Byrne. They send me loose sheets, or you can buy loose sheets, and then making that sort of jump between sketchbook and stretch paper or tape paper is much more palatable. And you'll maybe notice that some of the pressure begins to come off. There's something about it. I don't know what it is, man, but people freak out just a little bit when it's this. One of my favorite painters, and somebody that my father introduced me to at a young age, is a man named Roland Tilder. And he said, when you are in the act of creating, when you are actively painting, Pretend that you are a millionaire. Nowadays, I don't know, billionaires, if that's what the thing is, but the essence of that remains true, is don't think about what this stuff costs because it'll interfere with your thought process. That being said, there are a lot of really good, less expensive alternatives to some of the traditional materials. And then understand that there's no such thing as a magic palette. There's no such thing as a magic brush. It's how you teach yourself how to use it. Any questions? This is a 10, Escoda Perla, so it's got a bit of a point. So anytime I'm kind of doing anything where I'm painting around stuff. Now I've got to come down here. If I paint down, actually, do I? Yeah. Because we're going to have to be gestural. We, me, unless somebody wants to come and help. Bill, time, man. Practice brush strokes. Practice painting quickly. Getting to that point where you are no longer reacting to what's happening on the page, but anticipating it, is an extremely important milestone in everyone's painting journey. And believe me, you'll know it when you feel it. This is going to be a quickie. So the bead allows me to sort of stop and move somewhere else, but I need to load that up, or that edge will dry. I'm going to take a little lamp black and just put that in here. I've been kind of stepping out on neutral tint has been my dark of choice for a while. But don't tell neutral tint. I've been seeing someone on the side named Lamp Black. And it's nice. And we have to trust that these shapes will tell the story of the scene, you know. But it's much better if you can understand that one. You don't have to take my word for it. You can test it yourself. So, yeah, I was in the middle of saying, I've just come from Oregon where I was teaching and jurying their show and their convention. So I've ping-ponged between two conventions. And then in the middle, done a nice little, 5-day workshop. So, if I say something silly or weird, cut me some slack, please. You don't necessarily have to forgive me or anything like that if I have offended, but Okay, this is a red door, but I don't really need that just now. You don't do this professionally without having a few of them go. The thing is it bad enough where you have to admit it? I've done that one. We're human. And there's, everything never, or well, there's some things you can't control. Maybe you're talking and then trying to make a point and you lose, having a sort of conversation while you're painting is an exercise in really confusing these two sides of your brain. I taught myself how to do it by teaching my dogs how to paint. So I sat them down. Those of you that have heard this story, just laugh anyway. And my wife, who works for the local hospital, came home, and at that point I still had a home studio. And there's no one, it's pretty obvious that no one's in the house, or there's no car in the driveway, but there's a conversation going on in my studio at the back. And I hear, "Hello?" I'm like, "Hey, sweetie." And she says, "Who's here?" "Nobody." "Who are you talking to?" "Nobody." And then I'm somewhere in the back of my head, it's like, "Oh, she's looking for somebody to jump out of the window," or something like that. And I said, quite innocently, "I'm teaching the dogs to paint." And she just stood there for a moment, probably really thinking about life choices. And is it too late to dump this one for another model? Why are you teaching? I'm teaching myself how to talk and paint at the same time. The swine dogs, they were terrible. They were really bad watercolorists. They didn't practice. I think some of them chewed on their paper. I know they chewed the brushes. The cat was no help whatsoever. I'm going to paint through those windows. Okay, and then I've got this central figure. And I've got to worry about, oh, no, I don't. And then getting good at something like this requires you to become obsessive in a good way. I mean, if you're going to pick an addiction or something that, watercolor is way down on the list of things that are going to concern the family, unless you try to make a living at it, in which case they're going to, you said what? I'm going to paint around this sign. I thought you didn't paint around anything. Well, sometimes. No. I watch The Sound of Music quite often. You can't send me that one and not expect me to hit that one back. I play music loudly if I can. I'm kind of lucky in that I have a studio that is hold on. That's kind of mine. There are 3 other studios, so it's a collective. But most of those people are, or most of the people in the studios are hobbyists. And I come to work, I mean, it's not very glamorous, but I say, you know, I'm like a plumber. If I don't show up at 8 o'clock and work till 5, then I would fire me. And I don't want to fire me because I like me and we've become really close over the years. And then that would make me feel very bad about myself. And there you're now learning what's inside my head, which is always a little more than, well, I can be a bit much for some tastes, we'll see. Not becoming a chore. Stay engaged. Don't try not to go through long periods of not painting, but that's going to happen. I mean, and it's something I struggle with. A lot of people I know struggle with, and the answer to that is really not very sexy. Not that it would be, but you just go to work and paint, you know. Did that answer your question satisfactorily? Yeah, oh yeah. That whole idea of play. So my day begins and I doodle. And then that's something I haven't shown in public yet. Okay, you're not going to get to see it. Here? Okay. So that basically has its origins in this kind of language. This is just me studying horizons in the Southwest. This is me just beginning to draw rectangles and things and then follow my instincts. There's no reference photo. And then that's becoming these things that I don't necessarily know what they are, but they intrigue me, so I'm following my gut there and saying, okay, this is going to be, in the long run, good for me. Okay, I want to come straight down. Don't want to do that. You have to talk to yourself, by the way. Now, I'm going to begin to incorporate the figure. For me, 25% varnished, the rest regular. I hate framing, though. That whole varnishing thing is pretty nice because you don't, you just pop it in a frame. And that to me, although my wife is extremely helpful and she's a very good framer, and she has the patience to chase those little bit of, junk that get in your, between your mat and the glass, and which I don't. That's the one thing. I'm a very patient guy in most respects, except when it comes to that stuff, and that would just drive me nuts. You look at it, you tape it a bit, you say, looks clean, close it, snap a couple of pointers in there, and then count how many beard hairs or whatever it is. And then you open it again. Yeah, I'm not into that. But I also don't have room anymore. My studio doesn't give me the opportunity to paint like that, or to have multiple surfaces. So to actually do any framing, I would have to, is everything okay? I farm that out now. I find it much less stressful, and again, I run that one by my boss. He seems to agree. And I like my boss, except when he schedules multiple trips within a 7-week window of time. You're going to, well, personally, I mounted mine to Baltic birch panel. And I mean, there are a lot of ways to do it. And Matthew Bird, who is demoing tomorrow, kind of came up with the folks with Golden. Lauren got everybody together, and they came up with a really good way to varnish, which is a multi-step process involving, an isolation coat. And so first is spray varnish. And so on the hold on. So you spray on the plein air circuit, sorry. You spray, and then that's about enough. But if you're doing it in-house, and you don't have to wait for that to dry and things like that, you spray and then allow that to dry and add an isolation coat. And then I come back, and this is Matt's formula, not mine. I come back and then paint on a satin, or it's a satin, and the spray is a high gloss or a gloss or something like that. So that means conceivably you can, in 100 years from now, your ancestors, or not ancestors, the people yet to come, can actually clean it like they do the old masters' works. If you've ever seen that, go in with a Q-tip. So in all, in many respects, that then becomes very close to being as archival as oil. You can wipe it down. You could. I don't suggest taking Windex or anything like that to your cleaning, but conceivably, yes, you can do that. Got all these horizontals. I'm just going to put a few strokes through the road. Just a couple of action lines. and an odd number. Boom, there we go. So now we've got the big shapes in. Right? So now, with 30 minutes to go, I tell you, it really is nuts to think that you do this on a timer. But it's fun, it's challenging. First move, everything. Second move, big shapes. Now we get to play, and we add in just enough, especially in a situation like this. Demos can live to breathe another day, you know. Quite often I'll take them home with me. And then rework them later. One thing I do suggest highly is don't finish a painting just because you're looking at a clock. Give it its natural time. That is not the case if you are a professional illustrator. You got to meet your deadline. If you've missed one, they will never call you again. You can mute me if you'd like. Okay, so there we are. At this point, I could just do a couple things and walk away, which is kind of what I'm going to do. But you could go, further and deeper down the rabbit hole, But for these, a sound job of editing and removing things that aren't necessary is sort of the name of the game. So I just need to do the final shaping here, get the figure, and we're ready to, call it a day. But that glows is where I want it. This guy's got a big hat on, which I want to get rid of. But again, let me so now I'm going to make more of a gray. So I'll take a little bit of French ultramarine and some raw sienna. Not much. Watch out when you start going for these earthy colors because they'll go to mud pretty quickly. Burnt sienna, adding that to French ultramarine. I mean, it's a very effective dark, but if you're trying to use it as a mid-tone, it can clobber you, and it can also go, opaque really quickly. I'm going to then get a little bit, this is Rose Madder Genuine. So that'll be, I don't want a heavy, I don't want to clobber this thing, and so I don't want to really, real large value jumps. I want to be subtle with this so that, hopefully it'll draw you in. We'll see. Not you. Yes. All right, so. And all of these, there's stone. There's a lot of texture to that. Do I want to get involved? Not necessarily. Again, there's a time and a place. Demos are typically not the place to. You got a certain amount of time with a demo before you lose people. It is absolutely watching paint dry, But that's a good thing at times. It's not all the time. So again, with this detail, I'm hoping to draw your eye up a little bit. And then I really want to by leaving that little bit of light, can you see that where I put the window in? We're seeing through to the sky. So that means there's a room here that then goes through and views on another open window. And that's just another way. The more little places we can see through to that original wash, the more that's revealed, the more light will be in your painting. So, yes. I don't mind at all. I'll be very happy to. Yes. We met you in the hallway last night. You're from Waco, right? That was a nice chat. It's okay. We weren't saying anything extremely important. And it's always good meeting new people. Well, usually. That was quite nice. All right, so I need to. So this is where there's two drawings in every painting. One that's done with this that very few people see. The second one that's done with this that everybody sees. So I try to use the pencil or the brush with the same sort of alacrity that I would and gesture that I would with a pencil. And that begins to bring a little bit of life into the painting. Begins to. And it's, all painters have a certain speed that they're comfortable with. When I first got into this, I think my first really huge public demo was in Turkey. And everything was going great. I was having a wonderful time. The organizer dropped by and said, when's my demo? Tomorrow, don't worry. Great, let's go wander around. And my wife and I were doing that. And then the organizer comes running up about 10 minutes later, breathless, and says, Iain, your demo is in 1 hour. It's like, no. And I went straight to a bar and ordered a beer and sat and drew a demo because you gotta, and that's very common, These things are hard to organize. Now, this one's been put together extremely well, and Lauren knows his stuff, and so does Anna. But as you're learning how to do this, because it is not easy, there will be hiccups. One of them being, we need you to paint right now, and saying that to somebody that really doesn't want to paint right then. And it's, you can't say no. I suppose you could. No. Okay, well then we're not paying you. Oh, then yes, I meant. Well, it was in Turkey, so it was very weak. But we had a great time. The demo turned out pretty well, and they were pleased. I don't know how they saw it. I mean, it was a group maybe this size in an amphitheater, probably about half this size. And so people were, if I leaned back like that, I was hitting people. And then people were coming around the corner and going, ch-ch. And I don't do well with that kind of thing. They had invaded my space. I've got a bouncer down here, so if any of you try to rush the stage, we'll deal with you accordingly. I'm not responsible for anything really that I say when I'm in the middle of making a painting move. You can say what you want, but yeah, I'm kind of more looking at this, trying to judge, and see what I can do in 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So there's that red door. Excuse me, what? Does who? Oh, yes, I am. Thank you. My sponsor was Joe Miller, who's a very, very good, dear friend. And so that'll always be a little special one for me because he's such a caring person. And then just such a joy to be around. We lost somebody very, very, very special. One of the more generous people I have ever met. By the way, this scene is taken, this is July, and that they are wearing, this woman is wearing an anorak. If your wife is in Alabama and it's 45 degrees in Scotland, don't send her a selfie of you wearing a woolen hat when it's 103 out there. You won't like the results. I mean, that seems like a no-brainer. I quite often slip up there. And I like painting, if there's a place that really, things that charge me up, painting with good friends, painting in a place that speaks to me. But you don't have to necessarily have all those things to do a good painting. What I'm saying is, regardless, you need to go out and do it. The plus side of that is you will make it so that you understand where you are a lot better. You'll know place on a level that few others do. So, I always say in my workshops, just if you make the effort and you get outside and you're on location and you're painting, you just won the day. The results of that painting are secondary at best. Just by getting outside, you have created for yourself an opportunity to see on a level that most people will never look, and you're teaching yourself to view the world from an artist's eye or perspective. And it tends to become extremely beautiful because all that does is then begin to make me want to go deeper and explore more. We're getting really close, everybody, which is good. Sure. I've mentioned one, Roland Hilder. If you know a bit about recent, Roland Hilder painted, he died in the 90s. And if you don't know him, look him up. I mean, it's fantastic. Excuse me? Rowland. But what you want to do, he's got about 3 or 4 books. There's a few with step-by-steps. I highly suggest those. There are some ones where it's more about like the flowers of England and stuff like. Another hot one is Roland Hilder's England. But if you know a little bit about the history of art, you will, or watercolor, you will know the name Bob Wade, right? Bob used to go and paint with Roland. And Bob owns a Roland Hilder, which you can do if you want to plop down a good bit of change. But he painted with him. He took all that knowledge back to Australia. Because Roland Hilder is a visionary painter. And then in the United States, Roland Hilder is not very well known. Overseas, he is. I mean, he was president of the RI. He Hilder. So then Roland took some of these techniques, Bob took some of these techniques back to Australia. And who are the people that Bob saw, or that saw Bob paint, and Bob introduced to watercolor? They're the who's who of the Australian school right now. So those people, there's a connection that goes back. There's a little bit of someone that came before you and everybody that studies. And that, I mean, I can recognize it by looking at, David Taylor's work, or Joseph, or Alvaro. So the more people, my father is a painter as well. And I've had maybe 5 lessons, 6 lessons in my life from him. And he taught at the university, the Swine. And he made, instead of art, I had to take French because in his mind, I was already, these people will not teach you anything you can't learn on your own. Yeah, but I want to do that. You're going to learn French. I didn't want to do that. But Dad was fantastic at putting really good artists in front of me. So Roland Tilder, one. Of course, Sargent and Constable. Bonington. I think maybe my favorite, and this is a big maybe because it's hard to do, is Melville, the Scottish painter. If you don't know the painting, The Sapphire Sea, then when you get out there, Google that. Arthur Melville, not Herman, the Moby Dick guy. You won't get very far painting lessons from him. Let shape do as much work for you as you can. And don't sweat the small stuff. Has anyone read this series of books? Don't sweat the small stuff. And it's all small stuff. It certainly feels big when it's happening to you. When I first, and now I'm starting to look at things to do, or that need to be done. When I first started doing this in 2009, all of the architectural illustrators were fired because of the Great Recession. We had overbuilt by a lot. And I knew that job was not coming back for a while. And my wife and I were having conversations about, well, maybe I'll go back to school. Maybe I don't know what to do. And she, she's patient. She was drawing a paycheck, which felt good. And then I said, I want to be an artist. I want to be the painter I've always wanted to be. And she said, well, do it. That was 2009. I'm still trying. And I'll continue to do that my entire life, hopefully, because once you've stopped learning, as again I think John said yesterday, you will, if you're not painting, there's a couple of reasons why. Either you're no longer with us, or you've given it up, which I don't really want to do either. I know time will catch up with me. And I'm not worried about that. It's it's this weird sort of, what is the last painting? When will that be? But I try not to sweat that kind of junk, because it's just not, it's not helpful thinking. All right, we're going to get right around this guy. 3 minutes. Get rid of that guy's silly hat. And I don't really need to put any skin tone on this guy. I'm not worried about that either. I'll indicate some windows, but then again, vary those strokes. It's more effective than having something very regimented and a very understandable pattern. Okay. Okay. I know everybody's ready for their luncheon. I will get you there. What a crazy life this is. Just nuts. Okay, this guy's got a little. He's the bartender, has his shirt tucked in. He's standing in a greeting way. But out of this pub, it's karaoke. And man, they got stuck on Neil Diamond for about 3 hours, it seemed. And I can take Sweet Caroline, but not 40 times. Are you coming to the disco? No. And shut up with the Neil Diamond, man. All right. And then you'll have some hard man go, what's wrong with Neil Diamond? And then you just run. Or move as quickly as you can. All right. Am I going to do one last thing? I have 30 seconds. I will use them. So I'm going to start with Clearwater. No. Thought I would. That's fine. Quite often, think about the joint that you're working from. If you want a gestural stroke, work from this. Then if you're standing, that's a full body move. That's your range of motion there. This is the last you do. Nope. I've been careful in listening to you because I'm so very thoughtful. I'll have to sign it in a moment, which I don't like signatures to get too much in the way of the piece itself. Especially, it really can become something that affects your view, or your understanding of the piece. So there we are. It's still moving, it's still alive, and I'm just going to let it do that. But thanks very much for spending the time with me. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
And thank you, Iain, very much. Just a quick announcement about lunch. The coffee truck is going to leave at 12:30 today, but Smashburger will be here with the other trucks for lunch.
You're welcome.